Hi, Judge.
Hey, we're all coming on. I just said to Laura, I've never been part of a committee where everybody actually did what they said they were going to. That's pretty amazing.
We got a working committee.
Yeah, and
We're all afraid of you and David.
Yours
We're
came in.
afraid of you and David.
I won't tell you my bark's worse than my bite because it's not. Well, Miss Minifield got hers out about 10 o'clock Saturday night. That was pretty amazing.
It was an all-day task.
Try your microphone down just a little bit again.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, you all are still working, see, during the week, so you have to do it on Saturday. Oh. There's Mr. Cozart.
Hola.
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 We are live on YouTube, and so Mr. Cozart, when that clock strikes 4 o'clock, you feel free to start. It's your turn to start.
Just did so.
Okay.
So welcome. Is it Friday yet? Close.
We have one more meeting before Friday, David.
I bet between all of us, we have more than one more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, to that end, welcome and thank you. Thank you for everyone that is tuning in and thank to say the least, together. To see what we can do and Subcommittee of Law Enforcement, Justice, and Accountability, looking at the systemic and systematic racism that are at work in our communities. As we start here, I do want to make certain, AQ, let me in the share, please. On the share screen, got me disabled. Want to start with our COVID-19 statement.
Should be good, sir. My
Reads as-
apologies.
Not a problem, my brother. Reads as follows. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as assigned by the governor on March 30th, 2020, in the Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it's not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. At this time, you should be in receipt of the minutes from our meeting last Thursday. So I would entertain a motion for approval of those minutes, if I could get that.
So moved.
So moved by Sister Chief Maynard.
Second.
Can I get a second? Second, I believe. Did I hear a second?
Diane.
Second by Diane Minifield. Any question? No question, all in favor, signify by aye or thumbs up. Hands up.
Aye.
Those nay. Like sign. Let's have it. Minutes are approved. Again, much is going on. Much work is being done, even over the weekend. So I just want folks to know that this group is serving the community well. Let me also say that the members that are not on today are all accounted for. So even though they could not be here today, I think Dr. Price is accounted for. Judge Kaufman helped me with the roll call, who's not here.
Judge
and who's
Murphy,
in on
she's the
maybe
only other one, I think, Judge Murphy.
Judge Murphy.
have
And
here.
I don't know
Yeah,
anything about
so-
her, but she could
but
very
they
well be
have-
helping.
Yeah, so that the subcommittee continues to work. In fact, that's what we're going to jump right into. Agenda as the subcommittee, and it should have been posted publicly as well. So thank you again to Laura Hatfield for providing great air support from the mayor's office to our work that's going on here. I do want to make sure that everyone knows that this is live on YouTube. Comments can be given live there. Those comments are reviewed and shared with the subcommittee, as well as you can email make sure I get it right. The email is racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. Get that right, Laura? Additionally, that's correct. Additionally, if anyone wants to see the documents that we are examining from the respective offices and departments, those are available on LFUCG's website, and they are in a law enforcement, justice, and accountability folder. If you have any challenges with that, please just let us know in comments, or but you should be able to get that also. If you have challenges, email that racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. Let's fly into this. Our agenda calls for law enforcement specific topic. Continue discussing that the last few meetings. We've also opened up generally with a bit of it's become our traditional work of a kind of a warm up, a little anecdote that's relative to our meeting. I want to share today, as we go into the law enforcement component, that I had an interesting experience with our LPD. And it was one that was learning for me and my family, and I think also for LPD. You heard me briefly mention in the meeting on Thursday about someone to me that interfaced with LPD. My son, who was a little heavy-footed on News Circle, and they are patrolling News Circle again. And so my son was the beneficiary of that, shall we say. I had the opportunity in the invitation by Chief Maynard, who very swiftly kind of reviewed that for learning purposes for him and for me. My wife and I were able to review the body-worn cam footage of that we're discussing in this group. And we were able to observe how that officer interfaced with my son. We were able to observe how my son interacted with that officer. And very much to our pleasure, the officer interacted very well, very civil. My son, to our pleasure, interacted very well as well. He was interacting in a way that he's been taught by his father and his mother and his mentors and his teachers and his pastor and his folks in the community. The officer was very civil and very professional. So this was a good experience that we had and a good result. And there are good experiences and there are good results. We were able to talk about those points of discretion with my son, who said he was admittedly nervous and a little fearful of the interaction. And this was an officer that was doing what he was supposed to do. There may have been a moment by force of habit or by natural posture that his hands went near to his belt and weapons. My son was very conscious of that. There was a moment when asked for his license and insurance. We keep our insurance on our phones, which is allowable. There was a moment when the officer said, he said, it's on my phone. His phone was about 24 inches away from him, but he dared not reach for it because he's been taught by his father and his mother and his pastor and his mentors and his schools and his community. So while this officer did everything right, I believe, Chief Maynard, we discussed that when we were looking at it. It did not stop the fact that these perceptions based on histories are there with my son, and who's a good kid, of course, right? He's my son, but he is very much so, and I believe God don't make bad kids. And so the work of this committee is to ensure that, to work towards 100% of the interactions being like that. And there were 2 agents in that. One agent was trained, the other agent was taught, and both agents were conscious. And so we want more of that. So Chief, thank you for that opportunity. Thank you for those folks that are adhering to humane and civil interactions with our folks. We know they happen. Unfortunately, we have to address some things when that's not the case. So thank you to this group that's in helping keep my son safe, quite frankly. So let's review body-worn cams, and let's review what we've been looking at in reference to training, and let's review the recommendations that are coming. I'll do it this way, Judge. We've had multiple recommendations that have been formed. And I think the first, Sister Donna, you had began crafting something a couple of weeks ago, and you set something forth. I'm gonna give you the opportunity to introduce that. Chief, you sent us some additional information as well. Let me reverse it. Chief, give us an update on the information you've sent. Don't have to go into detail on each, just making sure everybody's aware of that. Our committee and the public's aware of that. And then Brianna, if you'll start with your recommendations and then others will follow, just so we have that reported out on. Is that okay, Judge?
Oh, sounds good to me.
Cool.
So several items have been sent. The most recent one, I'll have to go back through my sent files and make sure I've got everything in order. We had sent a request for the budget. So I did the FY21 budget for Lexington Police. So I have that laid out by budget, by bureau. And then a second tab, it goes over what those individual line items are. Also separated those line items into two different areas. One that, and this is my personal recommendation to show kind of what we truly control and what we don't. So out of that $79 million budget, we have about 1.2 million that we actually control as far as purchasing of equipment, various items that's laid out in that, where the other one is a lot of employee salaries, more HR associated with those salaries, contracts, rent, utilities, some of those things. So you'll see that. The other things, a couple of recommendations that were sent through, in addition to, also provided an assault with firearms report, and that is all of our reported firearm related incidents where an individual has been shot. It goes and covers the victim's gender, race, age, some of those things for the past 10 years. And that is up to date through this, as of this morning, so through this weekend. So that gives us a snapshot of some of the violent crime stats that we were talking about. So that's who our victims are that are associated with that. There were a couple recommendations that were sent through regarding search records that I think a couple of us, Denotra, I think had talked about that. I think even Dr. Price, some of their emails that I referenced as well.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I said several profound things. I'll repeat them. I wanted to make sure that everyone got all of those things and were aware and fully equipped for their recommendations and any information or had any additional requests for LPD. Keep in mind, we will be transitioning a little bit today when I move to Sister Kaufman, but I want to make sure everybody had that. Any questions for Chief? All right.
Well,
Sister Brianna, go ahead.
Okie dokie. I know my microphone's terrible, sorry.
I think Gary had a question.
Who?
Mr. Harris, did you have a question, Gary?
Sorry,
I had
brother.
a question, not about the stuff the chief talked about today, but something we talked about a couple days ago. If I may. I think that the prosecutors may have mentioned and the judge mentioned that, and I think the Judge Gorsoni may have brought the issue up, and that is cases that get dismissed and stipulations of probable cause. So my question is this, and I think, Chief, I asked the question if you keep stats of cases that get dismissed. I think your response was that you did not keep those stats. So my question is, if we get cases dismissed, and you don't know why they're dismissed, and if by chance they get dismissed because they were charged wrong or somebody's civil rights were violated, how do you retrain these officers, or how do you prevent them from making those same mistakes in the future if you don't keep those stats?
We don't keep stats on multiple cases themselves. Typically, we rely on our partners at the Fayette County and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office to let us know, hey, if we are seeing issues, identify those, help us identify and train and discuss those with the officers and supervisors. Plus, we also have a court liaison officer that also goes over to the court and helps monitor and has those conversations with the judges. So specific cases themselves, as you all know, can be dismissed for a number of reasons. But if there are identified issues specifically to, hey, we feel that this was a bad arrest, or you may need to look at that, then we do get that information passed on to us. In addition, we also have the Commonwealth Attorney's offices come over to our in-service and have provided updates, whether it's courtroom testimony or other issues that they have identified that we can work on better, and actually have those conversations with our officers as well. So there's a couple of fronts that we can do that.
And I know we're working on systems, but I would like to just raise the fact that even if a case is dismissed, let me tell you what it spews over into. That case still shows up on a background check. So when an individual is ready to vote, and if it hasn't been taken care of, it's supposed to just drop off. But that's not the fact. You still have to go to Frankfurt. You have to go through the process. So a person will miss an election year because that charge is on their record. I don't know where that goes. And I have not had time to read everything that you guys have sent me because I have a full-time job with the grassroots and community. So I'm a little bit behind, and I'm just going to try to be quiet and catch up. But I'm just thinking about these systems that are in place that is really affecting just living and life and being a part of the community.
Chief, who's responsible, or maybe I should ask Ms. Bayard, who's responsible for seeing that comes off a person's record right away?
It depends on why it got dismissed. Generally, if it is a suppression issue and the court has suppressed evidence, if it's one that we can't proceed, we will dismiss without prejudice. Basically meaning we have the opportunity to bring it back up if some other evidence comes forward.
But when you say, excuse me just a minute, maybe the judge in me is coming out here, but you say we dismiss without prejudice. That's up to the court to decide whether it's dismissed without prejudice, correct?
No, in circuit court, we will, all the judge is doing is evaluating the evidence and whether or not there is some sort of violation or some sort of right that has been violated. And so the judge will make the decision about whether certain evidence is suppressed. The search was wrong, Miranda wasn't read, those kinds of things. So but we can still...
You decide whether it's dismissed with or without prejudice?
We decide whether it's dismissed with or without prejudice because, for example, if there's an investigation that happened and some evidence is found and then a subsequent something happens and there's a search warrant, the judge may dismiss or the judge may suppress the first part of that. But if the search warrant was on something independent, we can still proceed with those charges. So that's why the judge doesn't make that decision about our case, because we can still proceed with the information. If the judge has suppressed everything, then we may not be able to go forward with what we have. So then we have to make that decision to go to dismiss that case. And then we decide with or without prejudice. And there's case law that talks about that's our decision, because we still, if something else comes up, some other investigation, something along those lines, we can still proceed or bring additional charges later or something along those lines.
How long does that hang around?
I think with indefinitely, but I think with the new expungement laws, there may be some different time frame.
Judge
They come out
Corsoni, can you help
periodically.
me? Because my experience is with federal court and this is state court.
Yeah. And Ms. Baird
I have to walk
certainly,
away from my screen. What's
explained the
up?
law correctly. I just want to add, there's a lot of discretion there in the Commonwealth Attorney's office.
You're quarantined. You just need to
And
come
I'm
on.
afraid to say that,
I'm in the middle of this meeting with the mayor.
Oh,
Excuse
one
me,
moment,
excuse
Diane,
me.
mute your phone.
Somebody needs to
Mr.
mute their
Minfield,
phone.
there she
Yeah.
goes.
You all can
It's
mute
gone.
her.
I think Ms. Vogel did bring up a good point on the dismissal, because it is a problem. And sometimes I think, and I'll say this, the discretion from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office could be a little better. I had a case where the defendant died, and yet the Commonwealth Attorney's Office wouldn't change the dismissal from without prejudice to prejudice. Now, I don't know how they could possibly bring the case back up when the defendant is dead. And the family wanted that dismissal with prejudice, and the Commonwealth Attorney's Office wouldn't do that. So, you know, I'll put a bug in your ear, Ms. Beard. Maybe you can get the word out there that there ought to be more discretion about these dismissals with prejudice, because it does bring finality to some of these folks. And realistically, it's the end of the case. And they want to get those dismissals expunged. And it is a barrier to some people to get the expungement.
Well, to our point on this commission, Judge Corsoni and the other state court judges on here, does this represent part of the systemic racism, or does this just represent a glitch as you see it in the system?
I don't have any evidence that the decisions are in any way based on race. I'm just saying that that's one of the glitches Ms. Vogel was pointing out, and whether it's without data, it's hard to judge that there's any capriciousness based on race on this matter.
And I will say along those lines, we try to, in those decisions, be consistent, and the consistency being dismissal without prejudice. And I say that because we do get a lot of motions that are filed by the defense on a variety of issues on how our office operates. And one of the things that's talked about is, you know, that we don't use our discretion because we use the same thing all the time. Well, we've survived challenges that way because we're trying to show, we are trying to be consistent across the board. Sometimes that leads to weird results, like the person has died, and you know, and we don't do it with prejudice on that. And I don't want to. Sometimes it's probably new people that just come in who we say this is how we do it across the board, or try our best to do it across the board. You know, similar cases, and so I'll go look at that, and we can have a conversation about that. But it just really tries to come from having somewhat standard rules so that we're trying to be even across the board. So when we're not trying to do something weird, it's just when we're trying to be consistent across the board, things like that come up.
I'm just seeing who's unmuted. Sister Vogel, I want to jump back to you, and I don't want to run away from Brother Harris's original point of the original charge, but and we are going to talk court system, shift to justice system after this. But Sister Vogel, did you have something additional? I see you're unmuted.
Yes, sir. I was going to say, Your Honor, as I work with the community, it doesn't matter if it's dismissed with prejudice or without, as long as there is a dismissal on the background check, unless I'm outdated with the information, that person is eligible on a record check to get that. If anything that says dismiss, the failure to indict, dismissals, those are supposed to roll off of a person's background check. But what we find is they're still on there. You have to go through that long process of driving down, and you can go through a drive-through window. You get the first AOC check, but the next one comes from the Kentucky State Police. It takes forever for you to get that background check back so that you can get that expungement. So if the dismissal's on there, according to the law that I read, it's supposed to automatically drop off as soon as you file for a background check. Well, it is stifling, and folks cannot sign up to vote. They cannot register because their background check is wrong.
I think that was a new law, but that just happened automatically.
I didn't get
Judge
to
Murphy,
hear what you
you're real
said.
choppy. You're real choppy, Judge Murphy.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Better.
What I was saying is that Tana, you're right. It is now an automatic if it's a dismissal, depending on the width of the law change. When they changed the expungement, it was an application. That was the reason that they were making such a push to make changes to the expungement law about how the dismissals. You're right that it should do that, but that yeah. So, but as we talk about processes.
Can we identify where that could be addressed at the state or the local level? Yeah, let's identify where that could be addressed at state or local level.
I think the Secretary of State can actually help us with that. I think if we were to reach out to Michael Adams with the Secretary of State's office, he could tell us how that cross-check is done, Tana, because as a Board of Election member, we have never had a citizen come before us as a board to say that that has been their experience. So I'd like to sort of research that a little bit and find out and give us some clarity to that.
Yes, ma'am, and I can be your guinea pig because I haven't gotten my expungement and I have so many dismissals on my record. They're still there. So
I would be happy to work with you and give our committee some clarity on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me jump back to, now what I understood, the charge was dismissed kind of based on the validity of the initial charge from LPD and what are the standards of, and did I hear you right, Chief Maynard, that you do have a court liaison? Is there a standard operation by which you guys are getting feedback? Words in your mouth, Brother Harris, but it sounded like you were unmuted, like you may have some additional insights to your original question.
Well, my only issue would be that if we're not keeping these stats, then how can we determine if there's a disparity in these type cases? If we've got a large number of people of color getting arrested, and yet a large number of their cases are getting dismissed, then I think that's a problem. That's a systemic problem that we're either overcharging or arresting people that really don't need to be arrested. You know, and we can't determine that if we're not keeping the stats. I think it was real clear, the information that Professor Price submitted today about these traffic stops and these searches during these traffic stops. You know, those are situations where people aren't even arrested, and yet some departments are keeping those stats. I know years ago, the Lexington Police Department used to do the FI cards all the time, and we had to turn those in. I don't know whatever happened to them, and I don't know if Fayette County still does that or not. But that was a report we made even when we stopped people, just talked to them, and we turned that information in. I don't recall anything being on there about their race or anything, but that was information that was available. So we can't determine if that's a problem because we don't have anybody keeping stats on that. And so I guess the department can always say, well, we don't have a problem with that. But if you're deciding what's significant and what should be kept, then how can we ever determine whether or not there's a systemic problem with racism on that particular issue?
So Chief, did you have a response?
No, just to clarify that we do not currently keep those type of stats. So it sounds like Mr. Harris has a recommendation for the committee.
So that was going to be my question, Brother Harris. There is sounds like a continuity piece from stop to charge to dismissal that we need to find who and how, and we can recommend to that degree. Would you be willing to identify that?
I can attempt to do that, yes.
And it sounds very valid. So thank you for that identification. And if anyone else wants to work towards that, please feel free. Brother Harris, let us know if you need anything in the way of information or insights that we could help pull. All right, thank you. Any additional questions? Sister Isaac, yes, ma'am.
So Judge Murphy, this legislation that you're talking about that automatically says that if you have a dismissal, you don't have, there's a faster procedure to, this has happened after I've been gone, sorry, to have that removed off your record. Was that what you're?
That's my understanding, is that this recent, I don't know if it was this legislative session or last, when they were the process, that was one of their,
because it
Judge
seems
Murphy, you're real choppy.
Okay, hold on. I'm
To
sorry.
me.
It seems to
No,
me
to me too.
that if they actually wanted to do this, why don't they just legislate that all dismissals are removed from records? That's the obvious thing to do, not make thousands or tens of thousands of people file petitions and get their record. I mean, they're not, there's no lobby for people that have a record. And it's expungements were one of the most irritating things to me, because there were many people that I thought should have their records expunged, but there was a technicality in the statute or whatever, and for purposes of employment or whatever. I think it's, and the entire burden is on the person who doesn't usually have the money to hire a lawyer to do it. It falls on the clerks a lot because they have to take a petition even if it doesn't qualify. It's a mess. I mean, there needs to be.
And I agree with you and I think this last time, and I just took my headphones out, so I think you should be able to hear me better now. I think the last changes were, one, it was to assist with those who are now filing, who don't have the money to pay the fees, that they can proceed and form a papyrus. But they still have to go through legal aid of the Bluegrass or find someone to help them through the process. I mean, there's still a whole bunch of hurdles that shouldn't be there. That's definitely, so as Mr. Cozart said, I think that is something that we can make a recommendation that the legislative just make it easier. It shouldn't be as hard as it is to do the expungement process. It just shouldn't.
Exactly.
And yes, ma'am, it is $40 to file. And even the Urban League, they ran out of money. And so, and they had a big backload of cases. So and that word automatic should be taken out of there because it's not automatic.
They could make it automatic.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. They could.
They're not if that's the policy that they're trying to implement, they clearly have something very easy they can do to save everybody's time and effort. And
Are we talking about locally or statewide?
It's a statewide. And so this is what I think, really honestly, I think that there was probably a push, and Kim can correct me if I'm wrong, is from the prosecutor's office to still be involved in assessing who gets to get an expungement, because there's still things that need to be looked at from a prosecutorial standpoint if they're going to be bringing back cases. Now, should they have forever to decide that? No. They should not be able to hold a case over somebody forever, for years and years and years, if they have no intentions of bringing it back for prosecution. But I think that they did not do away with that ability for the prosecutors to still have that kind of oversight, instead of it just being a person has a dismissal, they can go down and it's gone. So Kim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say that that's pretty much why the legislation is the way it is. And I'm not an expert in it. I'm still trying to learn it on a day-to-day basis. But just like Judge Isaac says, it's very convoluted for no reason.
And can I just say this last statement?
It's definitely a state issue, not necessarily a local issue.
I'll say this last statement and be quiet. I just want you to know that 1 out of every 4 African Americans have lost their right to vote. And that's part of the systemic racism. Yes, it's part of getting your rights back. And so therefore our voices cannot be heard at the polls because it is, and that is a fact. 1 out of 4 African Americans cannot vote. And so that's not even including the poor, the marginalized from the rest of the state.
Just following up on that comment, Judge Isaac, in your experience, are these cases in which the expungement is so difficult generally falling more heavily on the Black population?
I don't think that that was an area where I thought this is falling, this is a systemic racial problem. Now, probably somebody could give me some statistics and I might think that, but to the extent that, there are a lot of misdemeanor charges or whatever, or the ability, and it's an economic issue, the ability for somebody to process an expungement. But the voting thing is huge. That's the problem.
And of
So,
course,
I don't know, but
economic
I never
issues.
felt that way. And
There's-
what do I know? I might not have been enlightened.
The voting is, the voting is one problem, that you don't have 25% of Caucasians that can't vote. So they're in Kentucky. And so it is disproportionate.
Well, of course, the
Yeah,
next
1 in
step,
4,
Judge,
so.
I'm sorry, Judge Isaac, the next step in this analysis that would also be if something falls more harshly on people who cannot afford to pay these fees, then won't that inherently be racism?
I think, and even to go through something where you get it waived, it's pro bono. I mean, to file, that's just another set of things people have to file and the court has to deal with. It's to me, somebody, and this isn't going to happen, but at the state level, somebody should figure out how long they want these things to be on people's records and do it with the computer and just decide that things of a certain age, or if they're misdemeanors after so many, just get rid of them, or all the dismissals, just get rid of them. I mean, you can just tell that it's just a half-hearted effort and nobody's following through. There's no lobby for this, as I said. There's nobody that cares, or there's not money behind it to do what is practical and right and moral.
Okay, let me ask my question a different way. Ms. Baird, do you have statistics within the past 3 to 5 years? You said you're doing across the board without prejudice dismissals. Do you have statistics within the past 3 to 5 years of how many dismissals there have been without prejudice? And do we have those statistics?
Just in terms of dismissals or by race?
Well, you said dismissals are all without prejudice. And so I would like to see all dismissals, but I would also like to see how they fall by race.
We don't keep statistics about either one of them. That was why I was asking that question. We don't keep statistics about either one of them. The Administrative Office of Courts would be able to tell, I would guess the clerk's office or the Administrative Office of Courts would be able to tell. I don't know if they keep that by race, but at least dismissals. And our dismissals are for a variety of reasons. Sometimes if we can't find the victim, or I just can't think of any off the top of my head, but there's a variety of reasons we may say something is going to be dismissed. Dismissed as part of a plea, you're going to plead to something else and we'll dismiss this. It's just, there's a variety of reasons. And so what the clerk's office has is we have dismissed this particular case.
How long have you had the policy of every dismissal is without prejudice?
I've been in my office 24 years and it's always been that way. And I'm going to say it this way, what the stance is, because we recognize sometimes it will be with dismissal, with prejudice, but generally what we're trying to do is treat everybody the same under the same set of circumstances. And so if we're dismissing, that's why I said that we will generally make the motion to dismiss without prejudice for that ability. So we just generally have that. It's just that general policy that we have.
So let me ask, let me do some facilitating here. On the expungements, I think I heard Judge Murphy or Sheriff Witt, you were going to do some work with the.
I'm gonna check with the Secretary of State's office, and I'm also gonna check with our Fayette County Clerk's office.
Thank you. On the dismissal and dropping of those, there's some things that are going on at the state level, and Judge Murphy, hopefully you could help us identify some of those. Sister Baird, there's some things going on. I heard her mentioning the prosecutors component as it relates to the legislation. I'd like to get a little more insight on that. So if you can get us some insight on that. And did I hear you, Judge Kaufman, asking for something in the last 3 years from the prosecutor's office? Did you make a request?
What Ms. Baird said is that if we want dismissals with and without prejudice divided by race, it wouldn't come from their office because they don't keep that statistic, and she doesn't know whether AOC keeps it, Administrative Office of the Courts, but if anybody keeps it by race, they would, and so we can check on that.
Yes, if we would do that. I'm going to move us and make sure we get to the next parts of our agenda. By the way, I will generally say it's my belief that we should have demographics on about everything if we're going to be conscious of. That is an indicator that we want to be equitable in what we do. And so we have to keep those demos. So I hope that becomes standard. Let me make this comment for public consumption. I made some comments earlier on body-worn camera that I got to review. There is open records request that any citizen can make. Is that right, Brother Maynard, for body-worn camera incidences that involve them or their family or them? I just wanted to clarify that. Chief.
It looks like he's
Chief,
frozen.
are you froze?
He's frozen.
Yeah.
And I'll let Quinn know that he's jumped off and been kicked off, and he'll get right back on.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Chief. I was waiting for him to move. Okay. I want
To answer the question, Chief can probably answer it better than me, but you can do an open records request if they are involved in the incident. However, there must be the ability to redact if there's other public individuals within the body worn camera. But
Gotcha.
my understanding that is the policy of the county government can request it if they are a party to the incident that's on the body worn camera.
And Your Honor, do you know
I just
how?
want to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how long it will take to get that footage back to the person that's requesting it? How long?
If it's an open records request, that is by statute, it has a process. So it's supposed to be 3 days to respond, and then it says how long it needs for them to take to review it. If it is an open investigation, it may be longer. So I can't give you a set time. And this is from previous life experience. I don't know what the set time is. Like, they don't have a time frame that says they have to give it to you by then, but open records law says that they're supposed to provide you an answer within a certain time frame. And if they can't get it to you within 3 business days, then they have to tell you why they can't get it to you within those business days. And if it's an open investigation, then that's a valid response. And they don't have to provide that until after it's done. But again, don't quote me on, because it depends on exactly what you're looking for.
So if somebody can remind me to ask him, after the investigation is closed? How many days will it take?
It should only, if it's an open records request, then it should only take 3 days, as long as they don't have to do any redactions. It
Okay.
shouldn't. But there should be answers.
Laura, will you make sure that Chief gets the question and we get the procedure for body worn camera requests that involve individuals, and that procedure and their response requirements, if you don't mind. I want to make sure, I'm going to move us.
Can I
Yes,
ask a
ma'am.
question? So if there's multiple police who are supposed to have their cameras on that are like trailing the police that's in front, are all those cameras, can you request open records requests for all of those videos so that you can see the entire focus of the incident?
I believe so. I don't see why there would be a limitation unless there's something in, like I said, that needs to be redacted for someone else's safety that's in it that doesn't involve the individual. But there should be a policy, and Brianna can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we should have the policy about body worn cameras and I think we have that in our stuff and what that request process looks like, but I could be wrong. But if it's an open records request, you should be getting statements saying how long it's supposed to take to get it back to you.
So we should get that comprehensive information from Chief Maynard. And if there are things that need to move forward out of that with recommendations that we see that we could craft, we'll be able to do that. All right, I'm going to move us forward, Sister Brianna. I wanted to make sure we got to you and the recommendation that you set forth. It should be visible to this committee, but I wanted to kick it to you before. And there are a couple other recommendations that are out there that involve several different people's individual contributions. So,
okay.
Sister Person.
Just as brief as possible. We had discussion a couple of meetings ago about the disciplinary process and how it was kind of difficult to navigate for the everyday lay citizen, just knowing that process. And so we did mention the Citizens Advocate as being one of the avenues to touch base with to kind of at least point you in the right direction, because they do not take complaints against the police. They do simply refer you to the Public Integrity Unit for that. And so I did have a conversation with the Public Integrity Unit about, what's on their website. It is very explanatory if you look at the general order. However, it's a 42-page document. And so it's not very user-friendly in assisting you with that. So we did discuss possibly breaking the system down to where it's a little bit more easy to digest and help you work your way through the system. And so they agreed that they probably could break it down. And so the recommendation is that Lexington Police Department's Public Integrity Unit provide transparent guidance through the process of what to expect when you file a complaint. And that way it just kind of helps that general layperson be able to have more of a voice when they are trying to get their point across of how they feel they were maybe racially profiled or where an officer may have overstepped his or her boundaries. And so hopefully with this video, paper brochure, whatever format that it comes in, it will be helpful to everyday citizens to be able to voice to the police what disparity they've experienced when coming in contact with the police.
I will have to say, I just got a text from Laura Hatfield, and she said she and the chief are both trying to get back on Zoom. I also got kicked off earlier and had to get back on Zoom.
Brianna, in your recommendations, now and I haven't looked at the website or the Public Integrity Unit's process. Is there an actual form that a person gets to fill out when they want to allege some police misconduct?
There is a form, however, it only asks for citizen comments. Because, some people want to give positive comments about the police and they want to say, hey, this officer was great, they helped me with X, Y, or Z. So it is a general citizen comment form, and that is generally the form that you're going to fill out, whether you have a compliment or a complaint.
So there's not a technical form to to file for a police misconduct complaint. There's no separate form for that. And two, I had a question about, is there a reason why we couldn't recommend that it separate itself out and maybe go to the Commissioner of Public Safety, like a 1-800 number for ombudsman, if you have a complaint or, want to file a process against the police, that you don't feel like you actually calling the police to tell the police on themselves, but you can call like the Commissioner of Public Safety, or that would be the avenue of the mayor's office that handled the complaints for police misconduct. And then they would forward it over to the police department or whatever, the integrity unit. But maybe if there was perceived a separate entity, like a 1-800 number that went to the Commissioner of Public Safety for complaints against the police. And then it would get funneled to the police as opposed to it's going directly to the police.
That is something that we can definitely ask the Commissioner of Public Safety. But from my understanding, it's typically going to be handled at the Public Integrity Unit because of the way that it's currently set up, which I believe you reviewed that disciplinary process. And so currently it is the Public Integrity Unit. And so from my standpoint, it's just for everyday layperson to try to be able to make sure that they have a voice in the process when it comes to filing and understand the length of time and what the process entails. It's not very clear right now, but I can definitely follow up and see if that's a possibility.
Right, because when I was, and I didn't want to overstep when I was doing my portion. And so I thought that maybe like, even if you drive through McDonald's or, White Castles, there's a number on the window that says, if you have a problem here, call 1-800, and you get to feel like you're not calling that particular store, but you're calling some other, oversight and getting that information to them as to your fries was cold, or whatever. And if that other number that you're giving is a 1-800 number and it goes directly to the Commissioner of Public Safety, because I know that office already exists in the mayor's office, and let that Commissioner of Public Safety then funnel that complaint to the Public Integrity Unit, but at least the initial person who's making it doesn't feel like I'm actually calling the police. So that was one of my suggestions on how the community could feel more engaged, in getting the filing of an actual complaint against the police.
I will inquire.
Thank you. Great dialogue. I'm going to ask Sister Minifield to roll right into the recommendation that you provided some foundational work on. I want to pause though. Laura, will you and Quinn, I just started calling you Q, Quinn. I'm sorry for taking that latitude. Will you and Brother Quinn also make sure that our YouTube, 'cause it's a little squirrely today on our connectivity, it seems like folks getting booted in and out. There were some folks that had claimed that they were having some challenges on the YouTube or something at one point. So just wanted us to be aware of that as well. Make sure all is well on that front.
It is, and we're working on getting Maynard back in here now. I think he actually is, but he's the screen is dark. Is that right, Quinn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
It's been kicking. Zoom has been kicking people off. I think it's been Laura, Chief Maynard, and Judge Kaufman so far. So if I had to guess, Zoom, the overall platform is a little overloaded right now. But we'll keep letting people in and out in as needed.
okay. So yeah, let's keep an eye on that. And instead of going back, Chief Maynard, you will be receiving some specific questions around a couple of things on the body worn cam request and that procedure that between Laura and Sister Fogel will make sure that you get those requests. Sister Benefield, if you would move us ahead on the recommendation that you set some foundation for and other contributors to that. For just order, I'm going to try to move us to the next agenda item at 3 and give it to Judge Kaufman. So if we could move as swift as possible while not doing violence to the work.
Right. I was assigned the task of looking at the police disciplinary procedures. And so once the complaint is made, and I, as I talked to Brianne about hers, she was pre-complaint stage, and so I'm post-complaint stage. We already got a complaint. And so my desire was, based on what the community has kind of asked, is that there will be more transparency in that complaint procedure, and 2, that there be more citizen opportunity involvement. And so I kind of researched the current KRS statutes and the collective bargaining agreement, and I see where there is, a lot of barriers to be able to get, 1, community involvement, and 2, transparency, because it kind of puts a gag order on it. They kind of have decided there is a disciplinary complaint against a police officer by statute that no one can talk about it. It becomes, taboo, and everybody's got to wait until it concludes before anything can be discussed about it. And I think that in and of itself puts a lot of distrust in the system, at least from the public standpoint, that if they don't feel like, they can kind of see what's going on, or at least know what's going on, then they get a lot of distrust. And it may not be that anything inappropriately is going on, but the lack of the transparency creates that perception. And so I had made a recommendation that the statute requires that once a disciplinary disposition is done, that it's supposed to be, it can be talked about at that point. So the question is that when do we get done? And 2, how does it get disseminated that is done? I mean, is there some sort of, does we put it on the website? Do we list it, in the newspaper? How is it that we let the general public know that we've now reached the conclusion or disposition on this disciplinary complaint that came through? And so that there's some sort of actual, avenue that gets communicated to the public. And even when it's in the process, maybe they maintain some sort of website or notification process that there is a disciplinary action pending, without naming the actual officer, without actually naming the actual complainant or the specific allegations, but maybe give the date. We had a disciplinary proceeding that was filed on February 12, 2020. It is anticipated that if it runs its normal course, and what the course is, how that course is laid out, like you do generalizations without being specific as to that particular allegations, it may make the public a little bit more feeling that the transparency is there. And then when we get to the citizens' involvement component of it, of course, the statute says that, that they've got this public integrity unit, which is the officers. They've got this citizens review, not citizens review, but this review board that's all officers as well, and then a member of the collective bargaining agreement that's non-voting, and then Urban County Council. So all of those is just still the police watching the police. And so the way I look at it, although the statute is pretty clear about that's who those members are, of that actual review unit. As for the public integrity unit, I could not find an actual definition statutorily of it or collective bargaining of it as to who those members have to be. So it seems like to me that the mayor could appoint individual citizens and, swear them in. I mean, give them some sworn duties and responsibilities and let them actually serve on that integrity unit, and they be a public person. I mean, and Judge Gersoni said it could be staggered, you know, that they have subpoena powers, because my feeling is that the citizens need to be involved as early as possible, because if the investigation is not thorough and complete and it gets to all of those other steps, then what we end up getting is a decision being made on a fault of a non-complete investigation, and it's really going to mirror what the investigation was. So if you get the citizens involved at the investigation stage early in that public integrity unit, and, you know, I think that we will have a hybrid of what we want. We won't have a full, quote, citizens review board, you know, because not every community that has those feel that those are very helpful anyway. And, but we do have a citizen participation in the process. So that would be my recommendation to the mayor's office.
Others that had some augmentations or to that, or had some insights on that, Sister, yes, ma'am, Sister Jennifer, and then Brother Gersoni.
I hope you can hear me. My audio is really bad with the laptop. I don't know if you can hear or not.
You need to borrow some of Diane's audio. She's got plenty.
I had this problem before. That's why I usually use an iPad. And so you may not be able to hear me at all.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
I think your idea of transparency is good. I think you have to look at privacy issues. I'm thinking if I get stopped by a police officer, very rarely will I say, yes, sir, I'm 100% wrong. And I think you need to make sure that when we're transparent, that this is beyond the process of, it's a severe allegation. Because if not, I could see a lot of complaints being generated here. And when you're talking about the citizens involved, I think you have to have someone with a law enforcement background or understands this. Because based upon my work with constituents, most people that are put in a situation like this that don't have a lot of background it can be more negative than positive. So it's a delicate situation. Anytime there's an authoritative situation, and it's really got to be looked at very, very in depth. Let's put it that way. I've dealt with other citizen review boards in my position on the council, and it has to be very delicately done. So that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you for your insights, Brother Gersoni.
Okay, thank you. Diane, maybe I misread your recommendation, but I thought that you were recommending basically a separate investigative body that would be handling the complaint, not just adding a citizen to the review process that exists internally right now. Am I correct?
I did it either or. I did either a fully separated investigative unit or like a hybrid, you know, having a citizen that's been sworn and, you know, by the mayor and participating in that process with the two other police officers, because apparently now it's a 3-people panel.
I think the value would be in having a totally separate entity that does the investigation, so that the complaint would be presented to this inspector general, if you will, or independent inspector, as well as the police department getting the complaint. But then the inspector general would be able to investigate and do the work and have the subpoena power for, make sure the evidence is locked in by keeping the tapes and so forth, and then proceeding along. Now, what I suggested then, that person, yes, have them appointed by the mayor, but the council would have to approve that appointment to allow more citizen input into that process, you know. And I agree with Council Member Massadi. I mean, I think it needs to be somebody trained in the law or law enforcement or something that has expertise that could carry on the job. I also felt that, and I was talking to Dr. Price about this, anytime you have somebody in that key position, there's a chance that they get co-opted by the system, captured by the system. And so there probably ought to be limits on those terms, maybe only 2 terms. You know, they should be staggered so that a mayor couldn't come in and just clean house, you know, but staggered maybe during the term of the mayor. I think this should only be for complaints involving the public. You know, if it's a process about being late, if it's a complaint about uniforms, whatever, that's separate, you know. But if it involves the public, then this may be the avenue. I think with inspector generals that have been set up in other places, it's key that in terms of the the organizational graph, that they not be under either the mayor or the council. They'd be a separate entity that does not have to report to the council or the mayor, because if you have that, then they're going to be creatures of whatever division you've got them under. So the true inspector generals that work well are a separate entity, not under any of those folks. And that I think would help build up, I think support from the community that the job's going to be done well.
Judge Scorsone, would you mind writing that up in a little detail and sending it to Ms. Minifield as a proposed addition or revision to what she's done?
I did.
Well, you didn't go into that much detail.
Okay.
Ms. Minifield, do you think you have enough from him to consider whether to revise your recommendation?
Oh, I've considered it. I'm on board with that, Inspector General.
You are? You are?
I didn't add, I just added today, but this was in an article on governing, but the point about where it needs to be placed, that it shouldn't be under either the mayor or the council, and to maintain integrity and independence. That was not included in that email I sent, but Diane, if you'd like, I can expand on any of that if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you, Judge.
And also,
And
Dr.
just in
Potter will be here Thursday, and that is a good area in which to question him about the particulars of that and what works best.
And in anticipation of what the next question will be, or some of the things that our councilwoman has mentioned, sort of the criteria of that membership, that is a legitimate question. What is the criteria for membership of that body? And I think so we just go ahead and try to outline some of that. Judge Murphy, you were trying to jump on in a question, I think. You're muted and screen muted now. So I want to make sure and push us. We've got a couple other law enforcement recommendations. Judge Kaufman, we may or may not get to make the shift to justice system today, but we do want to talk about our Thursday meeting. So
I want to talk about the Thursday meeting and the Monday meeting. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Sister Jennifer, and then Sister Murphy, and Diane, you're unmuted too. So I don't know.
I don't have any more.
Go ahead.
If this is an objective board, who are they going to report to? That's what I'd like to know too. If they're not going to report to the mayor or the council, who do they report to? I think that's key as well.
That's a good component for us to be able to outline.
Yeah.
Well,
Let's outline that, not answer it right now. Let's consider it and make sure that's a portion of it, and any other components that we know for this to be a strong recommendation, all those gaps will have to be filled. So thank you for identifying that, Sister Jennifer. Sister Murphy?
And I was just going to echo, Judge Scorsone and I talked on the phone a bit about this recommendation just in passing, because we were talking about some other stuff. And I do believe, because I think what the benefit of having an inspector general type of setup is that then the pushback from anyone that would look at that statute, the way the statute is written, it says a separate law enforcement or investigating body. So it makes it, I think if you say an inspector general that has that kind of sworn capability or subpoena power, then we can say this has it. So it gets us out of that whole, we're trying to bring in somebody from the outside, like just pure citizens, but it would be citizens on it or those that have that capacity. But I think this would give us a easier route that we're still within the statutory basis without us having to go to Frankfurt to make that big change. Because that right there is going to be one of the hardest things. I think we still need to try to do it, but I think that's going to be probably one of the hardest things of all of this is getting changes through the legislative process.
Thank you, Judge Murphy. To that point, I have requested, Laura, I think you can give me a status update on that. We have requested, if we said yes to Citizens Review Panel, what is the flow chart of making that happen as it exists now? That's not precluding this recommendation. Let's move forward with it. And if we want to form something anew, but I think the law, LFUCG law, is going to craft us a flow chart of what needs to happen, just so we can put that, have that public awareness piece available to folks. Yeah. And then we don't have to talk in a circular around that, because it keeps coming up and we know it's got to do some stuff at the state. So let's just make sure we have that. Laura, that's in the works?
I sent that late Friday and I got a confirmation that they're working on that. I'll send it as soon as I have it.
Thank you. Sister Queen?
Yes, sir, Mr. Kozar. That's what I was thinking about. My comment was really about that, the Citizens Review Panel and how that, that could be gone about to be set up. In some of the work I've done or research about all of those things, there's the investigative models, or there's the review model is another, option. Also an auditor's model is another one that is, widely used. And I know that there's been some comments about ineffectiveness, and that is true. I mean, I think that's true too, that some of those models out there have, not worked for communities sometimes. I think all of it has to, or at least it seems from what I can, put together in the things I've looked at, is that it has to do with really, that careful putting together and identifying what your community needs. Many communities have gotten very stymied in the process, like it took Nashville many years to accomplish a Citizens Review Board, many years, because of their, there were political questions that all of a sudden came into play, and there was a lot of struggle that the community went through. But moreover, they were in that Citizen Review Board process. Much of it rested about having subpoena power or not having subpoena power. A lot of it has to do as Judge Scorsone was talking about, that independence, political, not being able to be, co-opted politically by anyone. And then you were talking about, who the board reports to. It's really reporting to the community, is the primary purpose of that, but also making sure that the city council and the mayor's office and the police department, are all very aware of, a different lens, when a citizen brings a complaint to someone, and having that freedom to be able to come to that office that is independent of the police department and make a complaint and have that really carefully reviewed. But, and I think there's as I said kind of last time, I think there's a lot of ways we can get there. And I think there's some good recommendations that we can explore about ways in which that, a citizens review process can be set up to where the voice, the community has a voice.
Ms. Queen, I want to ask you the same thing. If you have some suggestions for revising the tentative recommendation that Ms. Minifield has made, would you mind sending them to her so she can consider whether to add those or whether you should just make them as separate recommendations?
Sure, I'd be pleased to. I plan to do that this week, and is to add a considerable amount about the civilian review process. It's something I believe that I'm very comfortable in talking about.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Judge Kaufman, I'm about to hand you the con here for the last 15 minutes. I apologize.
That's okay. I'll take it. That's okay.
Yeah. And so I do want to do this. I know there are others that have recommendations that you have began crafting. body worn cameras, Sister Queen. Brandon, you contributed to some recommendations and others. I'm going to ask that we hold those and roll those continuation of this to our Thursday meeting. Is that okay with those with other recommendation components that are out there? Just by a head
Thursday
nod
or
thumb
later.
up.
Thursday or later, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for understanding. This is robust, and so thank you for understanding.
Okay, let
Judge.
me, yeah, thank you, Mr. Cozart. Let me just say a few things. Let's back up and look at this from a wider angle, if we could. You know, this is about law enforcement, justice, and accountability. And we are looking ahead, and we would like to have, Judge Scarsoni floated the idea, and I asked for objections. Nobody objected. So we are having Dr. Gary Potter come on Thursday. He is recently retired from the EKU Division of Police Studies or Department of Police Studies. I may have that title not quite right. Dr. Price sent, I guess, an email to the whole group suggesting that we see his PowerPoint or notes beforehand so we could formulate questions more intelligently. I have made that request of him, and so he will be here Thursday at our meeting. At first, I thought maybe allow half a meeting. That's too arbitrary. I just asked him to come at 3 o'clock, and it takes what it takes. He's an expert. I don't know. I recently saw him on CBS Sunday Morning. He has sent us an email or 2 or 3 after every single one of our meetings. He's watching, and that's good. He's very interested, and he's an expert. Looking ahead, Mr. Cozart and I have spoken with Damon Preston, who is the state public defender. He's in the Department of Public Advocacy. As we indicated the very first meeting, there are several of us who believe that the voice of those who represent indigent defendants is not being heard on this committee. And so we have arranged for Mr. Preston to come and talk to this committee. I believe it's going to be a week from today, even if we haven't totally transitioned over into the justice system. A lot of the things we've been talking about have bled over into that area. And so while it's not a seamless transition, it will help us keep everything in mind. Mr. Preston, I will also ask to send any PowerPoint or notes he has beforehand so we can know where he's coming from. He's going to focus on several things, but he is focusing on systemic racism and representation of indigent defendants. The other 2 or 3 notes I want to make, if you have made a recommendation, either in an email or as a formal recommendation, Laura Hatfield, our liaison with the mayor's office, is trying to capture every single one. In our shared Google Drive, we have a folder called tentative recommendations, and we will put them in better shape, but they're in that folder for us to look at and provide the fodder for discussion. If you look and yours is not in there, please look back for your email and send it again. There are a lot of emails flying on this subcommittee with ideas and recommendations. If you have a suggestion to improve a recommendation that's already been made, please call or email that person who made the original recommendation, much as Judge Scarsoni did with Ms. Minifield, just to talk about it. She may, or the originator may be able to take that and incorporate it into a second proposed recommendation. Looking ahead, that's kind of where we're going. We still have 2 meetings a week through August 13th. I have a feeling that's going to continue. We do intend, when we're ready, to move over into the justice system, but we're just not ready. just yet. And we do have some flexibility, but we just thought, given that all of this outrage right now has been prompted by claims and visions that we've all seen of police brutality, we thought we should focus on this first. So we do have an end in mind. Let me say it's 5:20, and is there anybody here who has other suggestions for people we should invite to come and talk to our committee so that Mr. Cozart and I could reach out to them? This is in the nature of experts, although there's not going to be testimony. They're not swearing in. They're just coming to tell us what we don't know. Any other ideas? Councilwoman Masadi?
I think you should have someone talk about collective bargaining.
And would you suggest, Ms. Queen, Councilwoman Masadi, you may not have heard that well, has suggested we have someone talk about collective bargaining. Would you be knowledgeable enough to talk about that, or do you think we should get somebody else?
Well, I think that, if you have someone that is an attorney who does the, actual collective bargaining agreements, that would be most ideal. I have, written on that topic and done some research on that topic, but I would not consider myself an expert in collective bargaining.
We can ask Dr. Potter on Thursday about his experience about that, although he may not be an expert in that area. But do you have any recommendations, Ms. Queen?
I think that I could probably locate someone who is an expert in collective bargaining, maybe associated perhaps with the university, but I would need a little time to provide a name.
Okay, all right. Councilwoman Masadi, did you have a recommendation?
We usually have someone from our law department. I know Keith Horn is very, well versed in collective bargaining. I think it's real important because we can come up with a lot of potential proposals. But when you've got a collective bargaining agreement in place, those things may not happen. As many ideas or proposals we want to come forward with, we do have an agreement. And I think that supersedes a lot of the things that we may be coming forward with. So I think it would be important if we have someone who has an expertise in that, for sure.
Judge Murphy, you've been in that law department. What do you think?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I assume that that's what Councilwoman Masadi was saying, is that we have someone talk specifically about what our CBA looks like and what is those obstacles that we would have to jump over or remove to get some of the things that we're wanting to do. Dave Barbary is actually the attorney within the law department that does that sits on the table with collective, but Keith Horn is probably just as well versed. He's also, Keith Horn is also the one that did that police discipline PDF that we have inside of our presentation. So if we're wanting to get more details into that too, and how that works with the KRS 67A and 15 and all of that stuff, Keith would probably be the best person to see how all of that intersects.
Okay.
To the law department, we'll get somebody.
Yeah, if you would just talk to Glenda George and just get the best person to talk to us about our CBA and about the obstacles or the hurdles we'd have to jump over. And I think that's a great idea, Councilwoman Masadi. Thank you. Who else? Ms. Minifield?
When I looked at that CBA, am I correct in seeing that it expires October 2020? So, are we ready to do a new one anyway?
They're negotiating they were negotiating right now. And I don't know if right now there's been some pause or halts, but yes.
Right. There's an evergreen clause though, that makes it stay good if it runs out, but yeah. Any other ideas for people we should have to come talk with us as a subcommittee?
Have we ever considered getting someone from the FOP to talk with us, considering that they're the power behind that side of the collective bargaining agreement? Jennifer, Councilwoman Masadi.
I think that would be really good. I've spoken a lot with the FOP leadership, and it's always good to hear their reasons behind a lot of this stuff. So I think it's only fair that we have to look at the FOP.
Well, and would that be better to have them separately or with someone from the law department?
I think you could do both. I've had committee meetings with them both there. The last committee meeting I had collective bargaining with Keith Horn, and I had Chief there, and I had Representative Baston from the FOP. I think it gives everybody a real good, well-rounded idea of what can be done and what can't be done, what provisions are applied in certain cases. The more information we can get, the better off we'll be.
Well, we certainly need to know like what the Fraternal Order of Police is thinking regarding going into the collective bargaining agreement, what they're willing to move on.
Right. Right.
They probably won't tell us, but I think that
But
they
I
would
would
tell
hope
us.
with the pressure in the community that they may want to reconsider that.
Right. Have an opinion as well. I mean,
Right.
they have this contract that they are performing and they feel comfortable with because they have concerns themselves. So I think it's
right.
Do we have a name of someone we should ask to come, or Chief Maynard, do you want to weigh in on that?
Is it Jonathan Bastion?
Yes.
Bastion.
And I would suggest watching that council video again, just to kind of catch up on what they talked about on June 5th at the council meeting, because it was very educational. We had a small time frame here, but that was 6 hours long. So it really was a good lay for a foundation for our conversation.
Is that the video you sent to the committee, Ms. Pursley? Okay, good. Any other ideas for, Laura, can you try to get Keith Horn and Jonathan Bastion?
Yes. Do you all want them together? Did we decide?
I think they said together would be just fine. And maybe if we have Dr. Potter Thursday and we have the DPA, Damon Preston, Monday, maybe we could have them a week from Thursday.
Okay.
And I circulated a video that I had received and bounced back from several people, like Brianna. I don't know why it didn't go through. So maybe if Laura can resend it out to the whole committee, because it just bounced back from people.
Okay. All right. Any other ideas for speakers we should invite to the committee? Anybody? Okay. Well, we are pushing up. We are at 5:25. The only thing I will say is that we'll continue this recommendation discussion, but between now and when we talk about your individual recommendation, please keep fine tuning it. People will be sending you suggestions. And I just want to say, some of you were not on here when I said it in the beginning, but I'm not sure I've ever been on a committee where everybody did what they said they would do. And this is just amazing and such good work from everybody. Thank you so much for volunteering and then for actually following through. Okay, Mr. Cozart, what else for the good of the order?
I think that's it. We are to reconvene on Thursday. That one is at 3, from 3 to 4:30. This agenda, Laura, will be good for Thursday. Yeah, we'll get you the agenda, but it will be very similar.
Right.
Yeah, and with our guest speaker included.
Right.
On there. So I think that's it. But I think we're good. Thank you, everybody, very, very much for your insights and your time. Sister Fogle, holler at me after this, please. I got my number in the DM there. And so thank each one of you, and let's continue to do good work.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe.
Do the same. Yes.